And we're back.
And now I'm above Drew.
It's like the worst version of Empty Squares ever. Right. Sorry about that. We've apparently it just went down completely, but I think we're getting everybody back again now. So apologies to that, people. That was nothing to do with us. That was Facebook. That was Meta.
It could have been better.
Could have been better, but it could have been better. But instead, it was Meta. So,
are we all stable now?
Drew, I think your sound's gone.
Has it?
Oh no, you're back. That's fine. You're good. You're good. Right. Sorry about that interruption. Yes, we were talking about. I'm trying to think where we were again. We were talking about
P-38.
P-38. Oh, look at that! Yeah. Just glorious, isn't it?
Yeah.
Drew and I were having a moment.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I think it's fair to say that Spence and I will be having a second run around of the P-38 when that gets released.
Oh, we will indeed.
Well, also we've also got box art for another Tamiya release, which is coming up very, 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 very soon, and that is their US Infantry Scout set.
I'm really looking forward to this.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
That is very bad, brothers. It's just the poses just look fantastic.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and if they're anything like the Germans that came out recently, or actually the figures that are in the Archer that are from this sort of current generation, they'll be really easy to put together as well, and the detail will be brilliant. I think that's a really good set. Yeah, it's I like it. I can see me using that definitely.
It's one of those ubiquitous sets of Tamiya figures where you can just dip in there and grab one for a particular project or a couple. And I can see people buying these in multiples as well, because you're always going to go back in there and, you know, probably even do some multi-posing and swapping arms and heads and things. And
that was the one thing I actually discussed this in my Archer review. That's not as easy as it sounds actually with these new kits, because the way that they're designed as interlocks between parts. So arms and heads and legs and that kind of thing can only go in kind of one position, and they're sculpted in such a precise way that it's very difficult to imagine being able to put parts in different places. You remember, like with the old Tamiya figures, the arms would fit against a flat panel. There'd be a flat section on the arm.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore, do they? Even the
not at all. No.
Even the little 48 scale deck man in the Tomcat is so. Each join is so specific and contoured that you would end up rebuilding a significant part of like his torso. Put a new arm in.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the payoff for that is the fidelity that you get.
Yeah, it's precision and fidelity in it, because you can literally just stick it together, brush some liquid cement over the joints, and that's it done. Yeah, there's no filling and blending of joints or anything like that, like you had to do sort of traditionally. It's fantastic. They're going to be fantastic to build and paint and look at, but probably not as much modification or conversion potential as
I don't think
in the old days.
No. I mean, they Airfix multi-pose figures, they are not.
I'll retract that statement then.
But in terms of plastic figures that you can get, they're certainly up there amongst the very best now, because they're so well sculpted.
But it almost doesn't matter if you're somebody who builds a lot of small vignettes. It doesn't matter if those figures double up over a number of vignettes, because you're always looking at them in isolation, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you've got if you think that guy with the Browning automatic rifle looks amazing, there's no reason you can't use him in multiple vignettes, because they're something that's viewed in isolation.
Yeah. What I like as well about them is they're so high quality that they can be standalone figures as well, as you can do them as standalones, or like you say, vignettes where you've got only a couple of those figures in each one. I really like them. I'm not really looking forward to this set. I think this is one I'll definitely be buying this year and using. I could see me coming up with something for that. That's for sure. Yeah, nice. And I like the winter gear as well.
Yeah. Also, compared to last week, I've actually been doing some modelling, would you believe? And
we'll have none of that round here. What's?
Oh, hang about. My camera isn't working. Oh, for goodness sake! This is. Oh, it's all kicking off here tonight.
It's all gone horribly wrong.
It's all gone horribly wrong. Stop virtual camera. Start virtual camera. Switch over to that one. There we go. We can all see me.
There you go. See, it works perfectly.
Goodness me. It's playing up tonight. It's one of those. And Spencer's gone all pixelated now. Yeah, we managed to get some paint onto the G, and that was using that lovely Vallejo olive drab primer, or olive drab undercoat, as I like to think of it. And I got to that stage with this model where everything was single colors, just flat single colors. And it's always at that stage that I suddenly have a crisis of conscience and think, well, where do I go from here now? Well, I've only been building models for 40 odd years. Where do I go from here? So the first thing I did was I loaded up with, actually, it was one of the olive drabs from the Mr. Color olive drab modulation set. And I loaded up the darker color, and I literally just went at this with the darker color in... The best way of describing it is just absolutely random, not spraying along edges, like I've done in the past. I'm literally keeping that airbrush dancing over the surface, or as Verlinden would say, cloudy patterns. And I just kept that going and kept that going and kept that going, thinned the paint down, and just kept building it up and building it up, building it up, so that you start to get vague things emerging. And that's what I did, just to get that just to break up that surface patina on the bonnet and everything. It's probably a little bit overdone, but we were talking about this the other day about, do we have to force the finish so that it actually kind of registers in images and things. Similarly, I then went on the inside because I thought, well, I want to have some nice deposits of sand and dust kicking around inside the footwells of this vehicle. And having just hoovered the footwells out of the binny, I can tell you sand does get it does collect in the footwells of cars. So that's what I did. It's kind of like a pre-shading layer or a pre-weathering layer of that. That will then be augmented with a darker wash just to add a bit more depth. But of course,
what is that dust layer made of?
Sorry?
What is that dust layer?
That is just Tamiya. I had it here somewhere. It's just a bottle of Tamiya sand.
All right, because it looks as good as any pigment work I've ever seen done.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to see which one it is here. It's just literally, it's Tamiya. There we go. No, is that it? No, it's Tamiya. Oh, I had the blessed bottle here about 20 minutes ago, and it's gone. Un momento, per favore. It is. Well, it was just Tamiya Desert Yellow or something. It was just it's vanished. Oh well, it's gone. I'll find it later on. But again, I've just kind of like put it into different areas and things. But when I actually get around to doing chipping and adding darker effects on top, it will just start knocking it back in, especially, like I say, on the wheel arches there. Is once I start going in there with just a bit of chipping on a sponge, that will suddenly, it will just pop completely. And the same with the underside of the chassis. All I did there was just a little bit of, I haven't gone mad because it's not going to be a focal point of the model, but I think a little bit of dry brushing and stuff on there with a darker color, and it will just pop everything out. So the one thing I have got to do is I've got to paint the engine at some stage, but hey ho. Again, it's not a focal point of the model. And then the other thing that I needed to get done on this was the canvas. And I went back through all my reference photographs of vehicles that I'd taken at shows and things. And it's very noticeable that on Jeeps and on American soft skin vehicles is how the canvas on the seats and the webbing and equipment really bleaches out to a very pale color. So that's what I did. I just kept going at that with different shades. I think it was deck tan, and something else, that sandy color. I just kept going at it. This isn't the finished article. This is the intermediate stage. Again, there will be other weathering effects put on top of that. I also went back and picked out the frames in the olive drab just to establish a nice sharp contrast between that. And then the tarp, again, that was sprayed at a canvassy color, but again, I just went over it with the airbrush in cloudy patterns and just didn't stay in one place all the time. You ended up with this really kind of blotchy, bleached look. And certainly when it's actually in place on the model, you do get actually a nice, let's just pop that on there for a second. You do get that nice contrast between the painted olive drab and that kind of bleached kind of canvas look. So that's where we are with that. There's probably more wrong moves on this than there are right moves at the moment. But as I said on the post, that I just want to throw ideas at it to see what works and what doesn't. Because I think sometimes you've just got to do that. You've just got to go out on a limb, and even if you come away with one idea that you think that definitely worked, I'll use that again. You just discard the rest. Ultimately, it's not bigging myself up here. Ultimately, it's not terrible. It fulfills a purpose, and I could probably add the wheels, put the decals on, do a quick wash, and that'll be it. It'll be finished. I just want to try a few more ideas out on it, bearing in mind that it's being done for a purpose. But yeah, I'm enjoying this. It's slightly different to how I usually do things, and this is slightly more adventurous than the finish I did on the Lafley. I went too conservative on the Lafley, and as much as I like it, you can only really appreciate the subtleties of that finish when you actually see the model in the flesh. So there we go, 24 scale Italeri Jeep. I'm having a tremendous amount of fun with that, but we need to get this wrapped by the end of the week, and then crack on with the tempo. So need to up the tempo, frankly. So
I like the shift between the canvas and the olive drab. Looks really nice. I like that.
Yeah, I like it. I like the overall. The overall effect is looking fine. It's looking great to me.
Looks good.
From that from our discussion on Wednesday about forcing finishes to relative to where they're going to be shown off. I've been doing exactly the same with the Super Hornet already. And sort of, exaggerating stuff far more than I would have beforehand. If I switch to the vertical, and hopefully you can see that's actually really quite a very forced sort of finish so far.
Yeah,
and that's had several different colors of gray washes, marble coats with the masks and stuff like that. But at the moment, it's looking. They're all looking quite exaggerated.
Are you enjoying doing it differently like that?
Do you know what? I really am. I'm still struggling a bit with going. No, I need to tone it back more. I need to tone it back more. Sort of forcing myself to stop at this stage has been a bit of a challenge, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But there's all the different shades of grey on there, and the dark grey and the washes on the emitter panels and stuff like that. Now, there's a lot. If you have a look at the instructions for these, there's a lot of markings to go on these, and then it'll get a flat, and because flat varnish or the VMS satin, that always tends to tone these finishes back an awful lot, I find anyway.
Yeah.
Because the reflectivity sort of kills a lot of the effects that are otherwise quite obvious, and then it'll be a case of hitting it again with oils and stuff. But sort of like the drop tanks here, these are phase hangers, printed resin drop tanks. But I'm really quite liking the way the tanks are looking at the moment. in terms of all the marbling and the mask spraying and all that sort of stuff, and blending it all back, but not blending it. Traditionally, I'd have done that pretty much the same, but I'd have blended it back a lot further than that.
I'm kind of glad you haven't, actually. I'm glad you've resisted that temptation.
Because I actually think, I mean, I'm looking at it on the screen rather than in the flesh, and I'm actually quite liking how it's looking. It's kind of moving. It's moving towards exactly what we were talking about.
Yeah.
In that I've forced the finish. I've forced myself to stop shy of where I would normally stop, and I'm still sort of happy in the knowledge that when the varnish goes on that, that's going to tone back even more to probably where I want it. And then you've got all to hit it all with the oils, especially for drop tanks that have that, you know, they're always filthy on the underside, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, yeah.
So all that sort of thing is yet to come. So yeah, it's an effort.
I mentioned this on Tuesday about your F14. You know, the finish on the F14 that you brought to Jadlam is fantastic. It is absolutely beautiful. In fact, I said the same thing to Nigel Bull. It is really, really well done. But like you say, in photographs, you can't really see that. And it is that sort of element. Are you painting for the photographs, or are you painting for your own kind of collection? Or but I think it's interesting to sort of step over that line sometimes to sort of see how those.
I kind of think that whilst I'm building for my own collection, I'm still aware of where it's going to be seen most often, if you like. So it's kind of trying to straddle that line between something I'm happy to have in my collection, but I'm also cognizant of where it's going to be seen most often.
Yes.
So
yes,
I think, you know, I think I kind of owe it to myself to show off the techniques I use, if you like, a little bit more tailored a little bit more to the medium it's going to be seen in most often.
Now we have a photograph here that was sent in by a viewer.
So this is what I was talking about the other night when we got onto this subject of forcing finishes, and so I thought it'd be interesting to show this photograph. This is something that hasn't been seen online before today, but it forms part of my article. But I thought I'd put this up and give you an idea close up of how the finish on the Archer was created and how it looks in the flesh, kind of thing. And in this, I hope you can kind of see that this is a very different looking finish for me. And I approached it in a completely different way from the finishes that I would normally apply to a piece of armor. And I stepped into the Games Workshop Warhammer world to paint this model. And you can kind of see how definite those details are on this, and how painted they are, and how much I've incorporated light and shade into this to bulk these details out. I don't think it's a particularly realistic finish when I'm looking at it. It doesn't look real to me. It doesn't look like something I would have had in my workshop diorama or anything like that. But I have to say I really like it, and I really like how it's sort of brought the details out, and in this picture as well, edges, for instance, around the controls, those edges are physically painted in, physically lined out. Bolts and rivet heads are individually painted there. Although there is a dry brush layer on there, they're also picked out as small details. And I kind of, I hope you're sort of interested in seeing this picture and seeing how these two small pieces look, and how much more kind of painted they are rather than sort of realistically weathered.
You say that, but they look very realistic to me. They really do. They look like, you know, they look like they've got heft and weight. You know, it looks like, to me, it looks like metal plates and stuff. So I think you're being overly harsh on yourself saying they're not realistic. It's a different technique for sure.
Do you understand what I mean by that? By how different it looks from other things that I painted?
It's stuff like those bolts. When you say, you know, you pick them all out individually, yes, but they still blend in with the overall finish.
Yeah,
they're not. It's not starkly like a lot of early stage sort of zenithal light painted models look. You know, it's not that kind of stark picking out of stuff. And you know, I do that quite often on armor, pick out individual details in a lighter shade. And then promptly go back and tone it straight back, as we've already discussed.
I very much didn't want to do that in this case, and this was what we talked about on Tuesday. It was I kind of pushed it as far as I thought I could go, and then I sort of almost walked away from it, and then came back when I'd sort of calmed down about it, and just thought, no, I'll leave it as it is. And also, when you have areas that are confined, like the inside of this fighting compartment, where there's figures in there as well, where you can't see the detail, you have to hyper accentuate everything. Otherwise, it just sort of blends back almost into nothing. I guess this is the closest thing on a piece of armor that I've gone to that Spanish aircraft painting style. I think this is the sort of the nearest I've gone to the kind of thing that Danny Zamabid and those guys would come up with on armor rather than doing it on aircraft. I think though that having looked at this, I'm going to push the next one even further. I'm going to try and I sort of, this is what I've got planned, John, for, you know, when we're talking about the Walker Bulldog, which we've kind of mentioned. I think that's what I've got planned for that Walker Bulldog, almost to push that as far away from what I would normally do as is possible to do, and see how that detail kind of lands when it's painted in that. The other thing that I found, and I guess this is something that you'll sort of discover, Drew, as you're working on this, is that idea of painting it but not oversaturating colors, so you're still working within I kind of a realistic layer of color, rather than, do you know what I mean? Rather than everything becoming
you're keeping it in this middle zone of acceptable hues, aren't you? Rather than you know, for me, a lot of the Spanish school is stepping right outside of that zone of realism. A lot of it is stepping outside that, and I don't mind stepping outside that in an initial pass with a paint, but then, you know, I always tend to bring it straight back into that zone, and arguably too far, which is the whole crux of this discussion, really, isn't it?
It's that balance, isn't it?
I think there's something to be said for limiting the color palette so that you are working within, you're working within the spectrum of those colors. So, say for example, if olive drab, for example, I would probably, in terms of building up that kind of variated finish, I would probably go for olive drab, obviously, then probably a kind of a dark black brown color. I've got my own custom mix, but, you know, a dark black brown color, and then probably something like deck tan, and between out of those three, mixing it with the olive drab just to, you know, get that, not introducing any yellows, not introducing any blues, or certainly no blacks, you know, no pure black colors, and you're just you're just kind of working within that limited palette.
You're trying to keep the entire palette sympathetic.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what that's exactly what Spencer and I discussed on Wednesday with our painting of the NATO 3-color scheme. Both of us have done that scheme, which is, and we've painted it in a way that is massively lighter than the real things are, but because we've kept all the colors sympathetic, it works.
Alex Clark does, when he's doing 72nd scale builds for dark yellow, German dark yellow, he uses which one does he uses a Humbrol buff color. He uses Tamiya buff, I think might be his dark yellow. That's what he uses as his base layer, and that's way off in terms of tone. But once he's put it into his model and he weathers it back and he adds the detail into it, he holds it in his hand, you go, yeah, that works. it's that kind of thing. The one thing I think this technique also opens up as well, when you're doing that kind of that accentuation, I quite like the idea of doing something, and I know a lot of modelers have done it. It's not a new idea. It's not something that, you know, that people are going to go, oh, I haven't seen that before. It's doing something in black and white, doing an entire diorama in black and white, where you're only using shades of essentially of grey. I like the idea of that, or doing something in sepia, doing it in shades of sepia. I think that would work. But one of the things I've been playing with this week when it comes to sympathetic color tones is I grabbed a color wheel off the shelf just to sort of try those ideas out, and things like using washes on reds, for instance. The wash that works on red is green.
Yeah,
and you know,
color, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's completely counterintuitive, isn't it? You think, no, that's not going to work.
Because I now think if I want to lighten or darken red, I immediately think of which green color am I going to use?
Yeah.
To lighten or darken red without shifting the red away from, you know, the essential color it is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's like that armor modeler, the figure painting trick of if you want to do kind of like shadowed beards on faces, use blue.
Yes.
You know,
Margot Krombeek, who's a Dutch, really fantastic Dutch figure painter. I had a long conversation with her about raw umber, and her attitude was raw umber should never go anywhere near a figure ever at all, because it just is such a muddy color. The constituent parts of it will just muddy everything. And you use other colors, things like violet and those kind of colors, like John says, blues, that work in harmony with those. And I think as modelers of equipment, of military machinery, I don't think those kind of things necessarily come into our heads, do they? We don't often think of sympathy.
No, very much not.
You know,
very much not. I mean, I've been watching a lot of the stuff with Martin and the way he achieves metallic effects with greys and stuff, and kind of thinking where that's applicable to building aircraft. Now it's not going to be applicable on like the underside of an F-15 where you've got that massive area of, you know, metal. You know, you're clearly not going to be using greys to achieve that there. But on a lot of other stuff you see on aeroplanes, would using shades of grey, like using shades of grey for chipping effects rather than metallic effects, would that actually get you closer to what you want to achieve? Because quite often I see armor models that have been chipped with a paintbrush after the main scheme, and it looks amazing. It looks absolutely bang on the money. And then 99 times out of 100, I see the same thing done on an aircraft. It looks terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of thinking, is it the actual technique that we are kind of almost conning ourselves into thinking is the only way of doing it?
Well, I think that takes you into that. That takes you into the realm of this non-metal metallics.
Yes.
Which you I think you probably have seen online. We've all, if you've watched any figure painting videos, that's the new thing, isn't it? Non-metal metallics, where you're using shades of color to create the impression of metal where metal paints aren't used at all. I think Ivan Jensen Taylor had a conversation about this. Could you use it across an entire aircraft? And I have reservations that would ever work, really. I don't think it does, but it definitely does work on smaller areas. You can use it, and I know some World War I aircraft modelers, for instance, in years gone by, who would never use metallics on their aircraft models because they felt that they were almost too over accentuated. They were too definite, and they used shades of pale greys and everything. And I guess John would be able to tell us more about this because he works within that kind of that sort of artistic realm of creating imagery. But if it works in 2 dimensions, there's absolutely no reason why it can't work in 3. All you're doing is tricking the brain into believing that what they see in front of them, what's in front of them, is replicating paint. Paint chips are a good example of that. A pale grey paint chipping on an aircraft should work every bit as well as aluminium paint chipping, because the area should be so small And if you get the tones the same, they should be.
That's what I'm thinking. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
The same way.
Yeah. You know, like I keep thinking of that. Do you remember that picture that was doing the rounds a couple of years back of that prototype XP-37? It's this aircraft. It's sitting on the ground and it's in this ultra shiny metallic finish, and it's done by an artist. It's clearly all shades of grey, but it looks like the real thing.
Yeah,
it's so absolutely phenomenally well done that it just looks like the real thing. I have to find the picture somewhere again, but yeah, I kind of think for that kind of thing, for small areas, gun barrels, some bits of the interior and stuff, is using you know, shades of grey to simulate the metal, and a better option than using a very strident metallic finish.
Well, case in point, we've been eulogizing about the natural metal finish in that painting there, but you can guarantee that the guy who's done the box art for Tamiya hasn't used silver paint in there at all.
No, that's entirely greys.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's entirely greys. And you and I are looking at it and thinking that, I mean, I've already mentioned, I think there's a phenomenal metal finish on it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I guess that would, somebody somewhere is gonna have a go at doing natural non-metal metallics on an entire aircraft and bang it out of the park, and we're going to go, yeah, it works, you know. But I think that the consideration that I would have to give to that is that when you look at a figure, when a figure is painted in that style, you're only ever looking at it from a certain point. You're only ever you're visualizing it from, if you're holding, that's your figure, that you tend to be looking at it there. Whereas if you've got an aircraft model, you look at you tend to look at those subjects more in the round, don't you? And and for a successful NMM finish, you've got to then pose it in such a way that you only ever view it.
You've got to force a perspective, haven't you?
You have. So it will work maybe in a box style armor where you're looking at it only through one viewpoint, and I think that would work. But I think it's a really interesting thing to do for smaller areas. Jet pipes, I think, possibly could work.
Jet pipes, gun barrels,
yeah, all of those kind of things.
All of those sorts of things, yeah.
Where you're forcing the highlights and shadows that appear on metal into the part, makes it kind of, I guess, slightly more complicated. But I think that'd be. Don't you think that would be an interesting challenge to do that on a?
I think it bears further investigation.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
You know, because you look at the stuff that Martin does on his armor, and he achieves these metallic. They're normally more heavily weathered and if not rusted, but there's still no metallics used on them.
Yeah,
and you get this brilliant sort of metal, very very realistic metal sort of finish. So,
I mean, that's one area that the success of that technique is that you're forcing highlights and shadows to go from either end of the spectrum. So you're going from black to white as a highlight, and you're bringing all of those midtones in. So that's where you can't do that and be subtle about it. You have to have the extremis of different finishes across the parts that you do. But I think when it's done successfully, I was looking at some Golden Demon. Golden Demon is the Games Workshop's, like, that's their highest end award. And I was looking at some of the previous sort of Golden Demon Award winners and everything, and where they've been using that. And you look at it and you go, God, that looks just brilliant. That's, and that's what's made me think about my armor. And, does that translate into a piece of armor? There's only literally one way to find out, really.
Try it and see what happens.
You just got to do it. And what do you lose? You could create something that's like, something that people will remember forever, or you'll create something that just doesn't work. But I think there's only one way to try that out, and that's really to give that a go.
And if it doesn't work, you've learned it doesn't work.
I say, what's the worst thing that can happen? You will end up with a finish that perhaps isn't to your exact liking, but chances are it's still going to be more than passable.
Or you'll do what sometimes happens when we do these things, or you'll do it and go, I really, really want to do that again. That's kind of worked in, as maybe that's the way that we develop what we do, you know, and that's what keeps everything fresh. You know, artists throughout history have never stuck to the same style, have they? They've always gone from one thing to another.
I think funny enough, I was just going to mention that point actually, is that yes, artists, you know, always kind of jump between different styles, you know, impressionism and pointillism and all these kinds of things. And I do often think that we as modelers, we perhaps get stuck in one particular, you know, we have our way of doing things, and then we don't look at other possibilities. As Spark said, there's always possibilities. You know, but we don't look at other possibilities. And I think you know, I'm certainly conscious of this at the moment, is I'm thinking to myself, right, no, let's really push the boat out and see what we can do in terms of finish. Because the worst that's going to happen is it's not going to be how I would have really liked it, or, you know, it will be outside of my comfort zone. But I think one would hope that I am sufficiently adroit at this hobby now that it's not going to end up looking horrific.
And if it's not what you wanted, you just modify it next time, don't you?
Yeah.
You know, like you say, it's not going to be, if this Super Hornet, if forcing to finish this much on the Super Hornet doesn't work, the model's still not going to look awful.
No,
it's still going to look. It's still going to look different, isn't it?
It's going to look different to what my models normally look like, but it's going to look an awfully lot similar to a lot of models out there.
Yeah,
yes.
It's just not a style that I want to do again. Or I might go, yes, that's exactly what I want. Yeah. I'm going to push that further when I build the Zero or the Wildcat or whatever.
Indeed. So, actually, Drew, along when we were talking about the Zero on Tuesday night, I sort of mentioned about like pale grey. I completely forgotten that I was working on that Mustang that's in pale grey.
We talked
about that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with that actually, and seeing how that finish gets pushed. And as I did mention, I will be pushing you as far as I can legitimately get you to go. You know, it's almost going to be, I think it's just going to be one of those don't take no for an answer sort of thing. And I don't mean coming from me to you, I mean from yourself, you know. You know, when you're sort of in that sort of position and think, let's just use this as a trial piece. It's going to work or it's not going to work.
Well, the thing is, if I can get the markings on these and then matte varnish them, I'm then locked into doing that on the rest of the model.
Yes.
Or I can't do that for the rest of the model, or I can't, you know, or I can't finish the model, or they can't go on the model. So if I can actually get through to the point where these stores are done in that very forced finish, and I'm happy with it, and then I then have to do it on the rest of the model.
Yeah.
Or it won't match. So
I guess that what we're talking about is that we're talking about where the three of us are sort of stepping into the realm of building models rather than building replicas.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And there is a definite difference between that. Models can be impressionistic interpretations of reality, and a lot of my favorite work out there is exactly that. And when I look at it, I see that kind of thing. But that's maybe a different tactic and a different technique.
Mike Williams has sent over the picture of that Roman legionnaire.
Oh right, yeah. So there's no metals on that, are there?
There's no metals on that whatsoever, and yet the first thing I thought was, I like the metal effects on that.
Yes, indeed. Look at it.
Yeah,
it's fabulous, isn't it?
Remarkable, isn't it? That's absolutely beautiful.
That's absolutely fabulous. We won't keep it up on screen anymore because it's somebody's copyright. So,
I think it's interesting that all three of us appear to have arrived at this point with very little discussion between us.
No.
We're all doing something, you know, we're all stepping outside of our usual techniques and going to try something completely different.
Well, I think it has to be done sometimes because as I say, it keeps the hobby fresh, but also what it then does is you find yourself looking for a project to apply a technique. And sometimes that might not necessarily be a project that you would usually work on. So it's not is it expanding your arsenal of potential finishing techniques, but it's also expanding your subject choice as well.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying that Drew is suddenly going to go from painting a tomcat that he's suddenly going to go, right, I really need to paint you know, a 1/16 scale Carpathian elephant, but he probably will, you know, chances are, Drew, you'll look at something else, like, for example, you know, a World War II fighter, like your Zero, for example. You'll look at that and think, well, this isn't something I normally build, but I can see how a particular approach might benefit that subject matter.
I've got an image of that Zero in my head, finished.
Yeah. I think that's important, John, actually, to take that into account. A forced finish on my 24th Harrier wouldn't have worked at all. It would have looked ridiculous. So it's almost that certain subjects work within those set of ideas. So I think it's very much what you're kind of trying to achieve. I can't imagine having those kind of forced finishes or those kind of over accentuated, highlighted finishes, maybe working on an O gauge locomotive, for instance, on a layout. They work within sort of certain environments, kind of thing. But like I mentioned earlier on, there's always going to be somebody that's going to do something like that, and you go, actually,
that really works. Yeah,
there we go. You know, that does work. It's one of those things. I just think it's an interesting experiment. I loved every single, and for me, it's about keeping freshness going as well. I loved every single second of that Archer, and I'm already looking forward to seeing what I can do with another piece of armor and pushing it kind of further. You know, there are plans in place to do that, but equally there are plans in place to do other models this year which won't go anywhere near those kind of techniques. You know, I have commission builds coming up where the customer will not want that at all, and there are other things like the model that we discussed earlier on today, Drew. That's not going to fall within that environment at all. It can't possibly. So there are certain. It is horses for courses, I guess. Is the thing.
Oh, trust me, when we get around to doing the Walker Bulldog weekend, because we're going to be under a tight time constraint anyway. But I am just going to be throwing really wild ideas at that one. Really wild ideas, like for example, because I was looking at some photographs of some American armored cars in Italy. And just literally the lower parts of them, you know, and I would have done this with the Jeep if I'd have been a bit more adventurous, but the lower half of them literally look like they've been painted with a sand camouflage because they are that dusty. It's just a thick film of dust. And I'm thinking of the Walker Bulldog, and I'm thinking, well, when I get around to building that, you know, I'm kind of thinking of where that would have, you know, its theatre of operations, you know, and I'm thinking, right, well, on that one, I think I might do the entire lower hull and inside the skirts and even the running gear. I'm not even going to paint it green. It's just going to be a brown muddy color, and then work from there. Do the tires in a kind of muddy gray, a kind of muddy grayish color, and then do some weathering effects on top of that to just pop them out a bit more. But rather than going, I'm going to paint it green, then apply dust effects. No, we're not even going to get, green isn't going to go anywhere near those bits. It's going to be dust first of all, and then other things. It's just, you know, and especially that Walker Bulldog, what's that, 10 quid kit?
Well, yeah, yes, exactly.
Experiment
and also it's
10 quid kit and a short period of building.
Yeah, I mean, it's got hardly any parts to it or anything.
That's something that begs experimentation, doesn't it?
Well, it does, yeah, absolutely.
And like I say, and then you there might be one, you might try 4 things, 3 of them don't work. One of them you go, do you know what? That's the thing I want to bring with me onto the next project. And like I say, the one thing that I have seen other people do, I've seen you do it, Spencer, is this whole thing where you've as like I've done on that Jeep, I've put the olive drab down, then I've put in that airbrush dust layer, but then I'm going to be going in with darker washes into that dust layer to then add another layer of depth to it. So somebody might say, you know, and we've had this week. We're not going to say where it was, but a particular model got a right pasting on a Facebook page, and you know, my reaction to that is, well, show us how it should be done then.
Yeah,
Don't
the irony of
what somebody else has done. Show us how it should be done. And when I actually went and had a look to see, right, well, let's see some of your models. None of them ever posted a thing.
I have to say that that particular discussion, I really liked that model.
I thought it looked really good. I thought if I was being ultra critical, I would say yes. I thought it was a lot of it was quite forced. Then again, what have we been discussing here? I really liked it as a model, not a replica.
Yeah,
but the other thing is that you were getting comments that people saying aircraft would never have got that dirty, which you then instantly counter with photographs of aircraft that were that dirty.
That got that dirty.
The underside, I thought the paintwork on the underside was fabulous. I was like going, I really like the way that looks, and the way that the panels have been done, and in sort of accentuation and the oil streaking. I really liked it. There was nothing about the model I didn't like, and I thought that the commentary that came in on it, the pylon that came in on it, was churlish to the point of being unpleasant.
The thing with a lot of that is, and I'm going to be controversial here. When these people pile on and they refuse to accept a counter argument, go and have a look at their models on their page.
Well, this is what I just said.
And quite often that is very, very informative on how much attention you should be paying to their opinions.
Well, as I said, in many of those instances, I couldn't find a single darn thing they'd built. So, no, on that controversial end to the show tonight. So, any other business?
No.
I
think we
didn't
even have a subject tonight, did we? We had absolutely no idea.
Well, we did fish and chips apparently. So
yes.
Right, I've got a couple of bits of housekeeping. First of all, a big thank you to everybody, because we've now busted through the 1,500.
Oh lordy!
Which is over 10 times what we thought we could probably originally raise. So a big thank you to everybody on that. Obviously, this will continue running until the DEC stop the appeal. But goodness me, again, my flabber is well and truly gasted. So a big thank you to everybody for that. We will be giving everybody a shout out at the end of the day, but obviously it's still open. So if people want to donate, please do. You've already done more than enough, but anybody who hasn't and wants to, it's still open. So thank you very, very much. And as we were discussing on the midweek show, we have decided to go with our Armour April. So what essentially we're going to be doing is, if you've got an Armour kit, doesn't matter what it is, can be anything from the Armour range, see if you can build it in April. We're going to be giving you a month to build it and join in. Or if you've even if you've already built some of this stuff, is just share us the photographs of what you built. But we're going to be doing Armour April, so I'm looking forward to my P-51, which Drew is going to be posting tomorrow. He said, without a hint of menace or passive aggressive kind of demands or anything, and also one of my Hurricanes, which. So you lot can join in as well. So join in with one of your Armour models.
So tomorrow I should be sending one P-51 to John, one P-51 to Spencer, and a Hurricane to Ivan. So everybody, please be a part of Armour April. And
really looking forward to it. It's going to be good.
Building and sharing your Armour stuff.
Yeah, because we might follow up with Mini Aunt May. So.
Well, if you do Mini Aunt May, I'm definitely going to do I've got some. I'm going to do a vignette. I think I fancy doing a little alleyway vignette. So I'm going to.
And then we might do Johan June, and then it starts getting tricky, because if I'm trying to mix kit manufacturers with the month, Tacky October. There we go. Nikimo November.
Can we stop, please?
Dragon December.
No.
Airfix April. You could have Airfix April, but there we go. Anyway, on that controversial note, uncontroversial note, we'll carry on talking about fish and chips after the show. We will actually, I'm just going to see if I've actually got the picture here. Yes, I have. I'm just going to show you this. It's a fish and chip related picture, but this was a few years ago, as I got bored with the town council meeting, so I went out and got some chips and came back, and
with your now legendary layer of ketchup.
Yeah, so everybody seated around me was helping themselves to chips, and apparently it was really annoying. But have you met me?
Apparently it was really annoying. Job done.
Job done. Yes. So on that note, they've all gone anyway. So anyway, on that note, just remains to say thank you to Spencer, aka Dace. Thank you to Drew. Thank you to you all watching tonight. We unfortunately we can't read all your names out again. Sorry about that. We'll try and get the act together for Wednesday. But we do appreciate you watching. We certainly do appreciate your donations to the DEC fund. So on that note, as always, stay safe, stay out of trouble, especially our friends in Ukraine. And we will see you on Wednesday. So from us all, goodbye.
Good night.